The house was unusually quiet that night, and even the people paid to fill silence with movement seemed to feel that something in the air was different. Michael Jackson had canceled nothing, announced nothing, and given no sign to the outside world that anything was out of place. But behind the gates, one private meeting had been arranged with almost no one told why. It wasn't for business, not for cameras, and not for the people who usually surrounded him when difficult conversations had to happen. The person he asked to see was family, and what was said behind that closed door would later feel like one of the most human moments of his life. It was a late evening in Los Angeles, inside the rented mansion where every hallway felt too large once the noise died down. Staff moved softly. Security stayed farther back than usual. Phones were kept quiet. Even the air in the house felt careful, as if everyone inside it had agreed not to ask too many questions. Michael had spent most of that day in fragments, short conversations, long silences, pacing between rooms, stopping in doorways as if he had walked in to remember something and forgotten what it was. People around him were used to his mood changing quickly. They were used to nerves, exhaustion, and the strange pressure of a life lived under endless scrutiny. But that night was different, because for the first time in a long time, Michael had asked for one specific person, his brother. Not a manager, not a doctor, not a lawyer, just family. The message had been delivered quietly, without explanation. And a little after sunset, a car pulled up outside the gates. His brother, Randy, stepped out first, hesitant, like even walking toward the house carried history. He hadn't rushed there with the confidence of someone who knew he was welcome. He came with the uncertain posture of someone who had been called after too much time, too many misunderstandings, too many things said through other people instead of face-to-face. The last few years between them had not been simple. There had been love, obviously. Blood has a way of keeping love alive even when trust gets bruised. But there had also been distance, pressure, public noise, family tension that had grown layer by layer until it became easier to avoid each other than to untangle what was actually wrong. And Michael knew that. That was why, when Randy was led through the hall and into the private sitting room, he found Michael already standing there, not seated like a king in his own house, not waiting to be approached, but standing. Waiting. No stage clothes, no dark glasses, no performance, just Michael in a soft shirt, dark pants, and the look of someone who had spent too much of the day thinking. For a second, neither brother spoke. Randy gave a small, uncertain half-smile, the kind people use when they don't know whether the moment is safe yet. Michael stepped forward first, not all the way, just enough. "You came," he said quietly. Randy nodded. "You asked." That could have sounded cold in another room. Here, it sounded honest. Michael gestured toward the chairs, but neither of them sat right away. They stood in that space for a few more seconds, held there by everything that had not been said over the years. Finally, Michael looked down, then back up. "I didn't want to do this through anybody else," he said. Randy's face changed at that. Some of the defensiveness he had brought into the room loosened. "Then don't," he said. It was such a small sentence, but it opened the door. Michael exhaled slowly and sat. Randy sat across from him. Between them was a low table, untouched tea, and the kind of silence only brothers can make, thick with memory, but not empty. For a while, they didn't talk about the heavy thing. They talked around it, about the house, about how late it was, about how strange Los Angeles felt at night when the city was still awake, but the rooms were not. Then Michael looked toward the window and said, almost absently, "Do you remember Gary, when the house was too loud to sleep?" Randy let out a short breath through his nose, almost a laugh. "Every night," he said. Michael smiled faintly. "I used to wait until everyone calmed down," he said, "and then I'd listen for whoever was still awake." Randy leaned back in the chair. "That was usually me," he said. Michael nodded. "I know." The room softened. That was the thing about family memories. They can walk into a room before forgiveness does. Michael rested his forearms on his knees and looked at his brother more directly now. "Ma!" "I've been thinking about when we were boys," he said, "before all of this became all of this." Randy understood what he meant without needing it explained. Before the business, before the headlines, before every private feeling became public property. Yeah, Randy said. Me too. Michael's voice dropped. I miss the parts of us that didn't need explaining. That landed harder than anger would have. Randy looked down at his hands. They were older hands now, but in that moment he looked briefly like the younger brother again, the one who knew exactly what was being mourned. You think I don't? Randy asked quietly. Michael didn't answer right away. Then he said, Sometimes I don't know what you think anymore. The honesty in that sentence did what years of family arguments couldn't. It stripped the conversation down to the truth. Randy looked up. That goes both ways, he said. You disappeared on me too. Michael nodded. He didn't defend himself. That was new. In older years, this might have turned into scorekeeping. Who called, who didn't, who said what, who hurt who first. But something about the night, about the exhaustion in Michael's eyes, made that feel smaller than it usually did. I know, Michael said. I know I did. Randy stared at him, surprised not by the words, but by how unguarded they were. Michael kept going. There were times I thought, if I talked to you, it would turn into noise, he said. Everybody's opinion, everybody's version, everybody deciding what we meant before we even said it. Randy's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said. That happened. Michael gave a small nod. And after enough of that, I stopped reaching. The room went quiet again. Not hostile, just full. Randy looked at his brother for a long time, then asked the question he had probably been carrying for years. So why now? Michael's face changed. Not fear, just weariness, and something more fragile than weariness. Michael looked down at the floor before answering. Because I don't want the wrong things to stay between us. The sentence hung there like something breakable. Randy didn't move. For a second, he looked like he had forgotten how. Then he leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, mirroring Michael without realizing it. What are you saying? He asked, softer now. Michael shook his head once, slowly. I'm saying I'm tired, he said. And I'm saying I've spent too much of my life in rooms full of people who wanted something from me, while the people who already belonged to me kept getting farther away. That was not accusation. That was grief. Randy's eyes dropped. When he spoke again, the edge in his voice was gone. You could have called me. Michael gave a faint, sad smile. I know, he said, but sometimes pride is just pain wearing a better suit. That line hit Randy hard enough that he had to look away. Because that was Michael. Even in private, even stripped down to the bones of himself, he could still say something that made the truth feel sharper. Randy rubbed his hands together once, then finally said what he should have said years earlier. I was angry, he admitted. Not because I stopped loving you, because I didn't know how to reach you anymore. Michael nodded immediately, like he had been waiting for that exact sentence. I know, he said. No, Randy said, shaking his head. I mean, really angry. At the people around you, at how everything became a wall, at how every time I tried to get close, somebody else answered for you. Michael looked at him steadily. That made me angry too. And there it was. Not agreement on every detail, not a perfect apology, but the first real bridge between them. For the first time that night, Randy laughed, a short, tired laugh, full of disbelief. So we both got mad at the same wall, he said. Michael's smile this time was real. Looks like it. They sat in that truth for a moment, and somehow the room became easier to breathe in. Then Michael reached to the side table, picked up something small, and handed it across. Randy took it carefully. It was an old photograph, not framed, not preserved, just a little worn at the edges from being handled too many times. 2 boys, 1 kitchen chair, 1 toy microphone, a cheap grin frozen in a room that had no idea what was coming for them. Randy stared at it and felt his throat close. You still had this? He whispered. Michael nodded. I kept this one, he said. Because in that picture, nobody wanted anything from us. We were just us. Randy's eyes filled before he could stop them. He looked at the photo, then at Michael. You really brought me here for this? He asked. Michael shook his head. No, he said. "I brought you here because I needed to tell you something while I could still say it right." That sentence changed everything. Randy set the photo down very carefully. Michael leaned forward. "I forgive you," he said. Randy looked stunned, not because he wanted forgiveness less than anyone else, but because he had expected blame, not grace. Michael's voice stayed calm. "For the distance, for the silence, for the years we let other people talk louder than blood." Randy's eyes overflowed now. "I never stopped loving you," he said, and the sentence came out broken. Michael nodded, tears finally rising in his own eyes. "I know," he said. "That's why this hurt." Randy stood without thinking and crossed the small space between them. This wasn't a polished moment, no grand speech, no dramatic soundtrack, just two brothers in a quiet room, years too late and exactly on time, holding each other while everything hard finally became simple again. They stayed like that longer than either of them expected. When they finally pulled apart, Randy wiped his face and gave a helpless half-laugh. "You always did know how to make me cry," he said. Michael smiled through his own tears. "You came in here ready to fight." "I did," Randy admitted. "And now?" Randy looked at him, really looked at him. "Now I wish we had done this sooner." Michael's face softened. "Me too," he said. Later, when Randy left the house, he did not tell the staff what had been said. He did not call anyone immediately. He did not turn it into family news. He just sat in the car for a long minute with the old photograph in his lap, staring at two boys who had once thought the hardest part of life would be growing up. And for the rest of his life, Randy would return not to the noise, not to the rumors, not to the public version of that time, but to that room, to that photograph, to the sentence that mattered most. "I don't want the wrong things to stay between us." Because sometimes the most heartbreaking family memory is not loud. Sometimes it is a private room, an old wound, and love finally saying what pride kept delaying. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that some conversations are too important to delay. Have you ever made peace with someone after too much silence? Tell us in the comments and hit the notification bell for more untold documentary-style stories from the world of music.